Dr. Sleep was directed by Mike Flanagan, who directed Oculus and Gerald's Game. This is based on a novel by Stephen King and is a sequel to The Shining, where nearly 40 years later, an adult Dan Torrance is pretty much done with life. He's a drunk. He's getting in fights in bars. He's sleeping with women that aren't necessarily the best people, drug addicts, that kind of stuff. We see some stuff that leads up to what exactly is going on with his life. And all this stems from the events that happened at the Shining Hotel, where he, saw his dad go completely mad. His mother was deeply affected. No, yeah, he has this gift called the Shining, where he can communicate with people that have the same gift. He can see ghosts. He can, he has these gifts. He has these tremendous gifts. But since then, since all this stuff has happened, he's been drinking to hide this stuff and pretty much just be done with life. He doesn't want to embrace these gifts. He doesn't want to do any of this stuff anymore. And in the first movie, there was a character by the name of Halloran who was played by Scatman Carruthers, but in this movie, he's played by Carl Lumbly. So obviously, it's not the same actor. It'd be difficult to do because Scatman Carruthers unfortunately passed in 1986. But in this, Dan Torrance is just like going through so many bad things in life, and he just has given up totally. But one day he decides to go up to a town of Fraser, New Hampshire, and he wants to start a new life. He realizes that things need to change. He needs to just take a trip. He needs to just do something and not just be a drunk. He had an awakening and realized after talking to the man that turned him on to the gifts, the gifts that he had, Halloran, and after he died in the first movie, he's still seeing a spirit, and he's kind of like his guiding light and stuff like that, and telling him, you need to do this stuff. There's another person, there's another, girl with the shining gift out there, and Abra Stone, played by Kylie Curran, who's tremendous in this movie, by the way. She's actually, sometimes with child actors, you're not sure what you're going to get. She was phenomenal in this. She was really goddamn good. And Halloran tells him that, you need to do something about this because there's another evil coming for her. There are people that want the gifts that, Danny Torrance has and want the gifts that this girl Abra has. And through, a lot of setup and everything, we see that Abra has a lot of these same gifts. She makes silverware hang from the ceiling. She can guess things. She can see things, including the actions of a group called the Outlook, and they are led by Rose the Hat, played by Rebecca Ferguson. She was in Life and the Mission Impossible sequels, and actually is a pretty good actress. Life I did not particularly care for, but it was what it was. And they're a band of people that have lived a while and stuff like that, and hunt those that have that gift called the Shining, that they call steam, that they live off the steam, and there are ways to get it, and it's usually through violent methods and stuff like that. I was pretty excited to see this movie because I was interested to see how Stephen King would view this one. As he said in interviews, he did not care for how Stanley Kubrick did The Shining, even though I liked Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining. It did deviate from the book. I also want to make it clear that I did not read Dr. Sleep at all. So I don't know how this ties to the book. So I'm going in fresh with not the mind, how does this hold up to the book? Does this hold up to the book? Were these characters changed? All this stuff. So with this movie, it is a bit long. It's about 2 hours and 31, 2 hours and 32 minutes, and it only drags a little bit. This actually is pretty breezy and tells a pretty good story of Danny trying to rise back up, Danny Torrance trying to rise back up, stop drinking. Once he gets into Fraser, New Hampshire, he befriends a guy named Billy, played by Cliff Curtis, who's been in a ton of movies. He was in Sunshine, Collateral Damage, and a bunch of other stuff. And he's actually a really good actor. And from there, he sees something in him. He helps him get sober, and all this stuff is happening. And then Danny comes in contact, because he's no longer got the cloud of alcohol. He comes in contact with Abra, who's able to communicate with him. And through a series of events, there's this group, led by Rose the Hat, the Outlook, that are doing these nasty things and hunting down those that have these gifts so they can extend their lives, and do it through pretty violent methods. With this movie, though, there were some disposable characters that I felt were just kind of there just to be offed at some point. Some were pretty one note. There was a good core in the cast here. Ewan McGregor and Kylie Curran do a phenomenal job. They have great on-screen chemistry as two with the same gifts and everything, and Danny having to take on the role of Halloran, where he is trying to save her and everything, and do what Halloran did for him. So that's a nice dynamic and everything. And then you got the parents that don't want to believe that their daughter has these gifts, even though they do. And Danny's haunted by visions and all this. And there's some good atmospheric shots. There are some cool visuals. And this, and Rose realizing that, holy crap, this one that we are hunting, Abra, is a lot stronger, can get in her head. She can do a whole lot of stuff, and she can fight back against them, even though she's only a child. And as things go on, it becomes obvious that, well, hey, what we're going to have to do is Danny's like, we're going to have to revisit the past. We're going to have to do some stuff. So I'll get into spoilers here in a little bit, but there's a lot that ties back to the original Shining. I will say that this is not as good as The Shining, and I don't think anybody really expected it to be. I expected a decent movie. I got a pretty good movie. Overall, I wasn't disappointed with it. There were some issues, and I'm going to get into as far as, pacing and stuff like that. And some of the characters felt pretty disposable. But other than that, quite a bit of this movie was very well done, and I thought paid very good homage to the original Shining while fleshing out this story. And apparently Stephen King is pretty happy with it. So, I mean, that's certainly something that, is good to see, since he does put a lot of love into his books. I've read some of them. I haven't read all of them, and I did not read Doctor Sleep. So if you did, let me know how this movie does the story in the comments, like compared to the books. So I'm going to get into spoilers here, though, at 7 minutes. So 3, 2, 1, and go. And if you're still here, sorry, but in the beginning, Dan Torrance is a drunk. We have flashbacks of him beating the shit out of a guy with a pool ball. And he sleeps with this woman where they do a whole bunch of drugs and everything and this kind of stuff. And he even wakes up and is going to take the money that she used his money basically to buy drugs, but then sees that he has a kid. And, Halloran's like, come on, give her money back. Hey, come on, she got a kid, this kind of stuff. She may have done that, but don't be like that. Don't punish the kid. Without saying that, that's actually what's the implication. Then he moves to, goes to Fraser, New Hampshire, because he doesn't really have any life left. And he feels compelled to do this stuff. Gets his job. Cliff Curtis's character takes a liking to him, sees something because he goes to AA meetings because he too was drunk at one point and sees something. So Dan gets a room somewhere and is able to be a pretty good tenant. And actually we start even in 1980 where we see what Rose does, traps the girl in the woods around her group and everything, her group of ragtag misfits, and they steal her essence. Steam, as they call it. The more fearful somebody is, the better their steam tastes, and the better it is, and the more energizing it is for this group called the Outlook. And there are some that are older. One guy, that's way old, that apparently was back in ancient Roman times somehow. But the steam helps people stay, ageless. Then we go to 2011, and things are going on where you see Dan as a drunk and this kind of stuff, and all that, and another girl is captured, a young girl that that has the same gift, but she uses it for evil, lures men in on dates, but she's very, very young. She's like 15 or 16. Well, says she is. I actually think the actress is more like 20, but she looks like she could pass for that, and it would be believable. She manages to, basically get a guy, to put him to sleep, gets his money. She gets captured by this group and actually gets turned into one of them. So this group is a little bit stronger. And there was this one particular scene later in the movie. Abra is, embracing her gifts and this kind of stuff. I mentioned earlier about the spoon scene where she saw this magician do this trick with a whole bunch of spoons, and then the parents went into the room went to the kitchen after the party was done, and was wondering why was all the silverware on the floor, all the forks, all the spoons were hanging on the ceiling, and Abra's just looking up and then said abracadabra, and then they all fall and stuff like that. So then we go to present day, and this group, the Outlook, are still killing people. They're still killing those with the gift, and usually children, usually those that are young, because then the essence is pure, the steam is pure, the gift is pure, and they can, live off of it a whole lot more. They even trap it in like weird thermos like stuff where it actually almost reminds me of the canisters that they use in District 9, the canisters they used even in Jurassic Park, if you know what I'm saying. Weird, like it's almost like coffee mugs where it's like, yeah, just add two sugars and some cream, and you could and you could live forever, and you can, it's steam essence, it's steam coffee. But anyway, there's this one particularly violent scene where they capture this kid that was playing at a baseball game that has this gift, the same gift, and pretty violent shit where they show him being tortured for quite a while. That's why I called it Torturing Children the movie, because there were some times, especially with like this scene, it drug on a bit. If you've ever seen Exorcist Beginning, that's what it reminded me of. It was a little bit much, but it did at least serve a purpose and showed the violence of this group. And the old guy's essence and everything, or his steam, and they got that. They were able to extend their lives more. But boy, that was brutal. They just kept cutting to it. Abra seeing all this and just horrified by it, because since she has this gift, she's locked in on this. And her gift is so strong that she's able to see this group that usually can mask themselves from anybody. And all through this, Dan Torrance is communicated to by Abra, and from there, she's like, hey, you need to find this boy, he's missing, we need to give him a proper burial, this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, oh, okay, we're just going to go off and do that. Through this movie, there is some good character work. Once again, Ewan McGregor and Kylie Curran do a phenomenal job. And really add a lot of weight to this movie. Rebecca Ferguson was fine in it as well. She was actually pretty good as a villain. She wasn't great. She was kind of one note, but especially the rest of the group was especially one note. You had you had like the one typical henchman guy, and then everybody else was disposable. Everybody else was totally disposable. Like none of those characters felt really important at all. I know why they were put in there, because there's this one particular scene where they're going to try to get at Abra, and she tricks them into thinking that she's on a park bench in the woods, and nope, they get picked off by Dan and Billy with some high-powered rifles. And a pretty good scene, but it felt very kind of thrown in there. It just, the way it was paced and stuff like that, it was pretty interesting to see how they die, though. They die almost like vampires. They fry and everything, and then they turn to ash, because their bodies are basically husks without this steam. So it's almost making like they're train powered, or they're coal powered trains. But in that, it does end up where Abra does get captured, but then she gets freed, because even though she's drugged, Danny's able to use his gifts finally to help her, and they end up going back to the hotel for The Shining. This is where the movie, I feel, could have been fleshed out a little bit more. It took forever to get to the Shining Hotel, that I thought they could have given about 15 more minutes to it. I'm talking like cut out some of the stuff that they did at some points in the movie before, and then maybe add 15 minutes to the Shining Hotel, because it was like great. They had revamps of the iconic music as they were driving up there in a Toyota Camry. So the Toyota Camry could clearly get up the snowy roads in the Colorado mountains. But I digress. Whatever. It's a horror movie. I mean, I can't expect that much logic. And Danny's like, I gotta wake it up. I gotta wake up the evil and everything. This thing's been in wasteland for a while. So suddenly he wakes it up. Everything starts to really go right, because, okay, what exactly is going on with this hotel? Why? And like, okay, all these lights are activated. He turns on all this power stuff. What is going on? Earlier in the movie, something that I do want to make mention of, Halloran gives him an idea where, hey, as a kid, he handed him a little box, like a little box as a visual, and I want you to visualize this in your mind. And anytime a ghost comes, or anytime something comes to try to take you away or hurt you, create this box in your mind. Create these boxes in your mind and lock them away. So that's what he does with every ghost from the Shining Hotel that tries to haunt him. Every demon, anything, he locks them in this box. And then later, when they go back to that hotel, Rosa Hatt's the only one left. She's the only one left, and she follows them somehow and manages to get there. And she ends up at one point getting locked in the maze. She ends up getting locked in, the hedge maze and all that stuff. She's running around and everything. Well, she does kind of outsmart them at some point, but she does get her legs kind of cut up. And then Danny tries to trap her in a box. That doesn't work. She finally breaks out because she is pretty strong. And she is unable to, she's unable to get Abra at the time. She manages to wound Danny, where, like, even get his femoral artery in his leg. And is doing this and pressing down the leg, and she realizes how strong he is and is, getting his steam out, the Shining. But he's got a lot of it, so it's going to take her a while to do that. She keeps pressing on the leg, doing that, and then she's like, wait a second, what are you hiding in here? And it's like, doing this. Oh, I'm not. It's like, they're not hiding. They're not hiding. They're starving. And he releases them all from the box. So all the twins, everybody in there suddenly attacks. Oh, and then earlier there's a guy that looks like he's trying to do a knockoff Jack Nicholson cosplay, talking to him about all this stuff. And what was pretty good about this was the fact that the guy actually did a pretty decent Jack Nicholson impression, but that almost felt a little bit tacked on, though it did make a whole lot of sense. But Rosehad eventually gets trapped, or she doesn't get trapped. She actually ends up getting, her face is put in and that kind of stuff when everybody's doing all this and everything, and and she dies. And then Danny gets taken over by the evil. He starts to pursue Abra, and Abra ends up eventually having to convince him, hey, you can't do this, you can't do this. Well, what ends up happening is Abra ends up saying, well, hey, this is what you need to do. You need to do, we need to get out of this hotel. Danny's like, no, you can't. I'm possessed by this evil. I can't leave. There's no way I can leave. So what ended up happening is he basically sacrifices himself so she can live. And there were some pretty good moments with this. Like, I'm kind of generalizing a lot of this. There were some good scenes. There were quite a few good scenes. Very little bit of this movie was really even bad. Most of it was just okay. But with this movie, I gotta say, I gotta give it a B+. I was impressed with it. It's not quite an A-. I was close to an A-, but enough of it felt like a little bit tacked on, where maybe that's how the book is. I don't know. Again, I did not read the book, but B+. But before I go, folks, I want to bring on a special guest. Because somebody wanted to make an appearance. So he has the gift of the Shining in the form of the Meowing. Sir, by the way, who smells like smoke because somebody's burning stuff outside, and he sees birdies, so he's going to go see them. Is that what you use your Shining gift for, sir? You use them to go see the birds? Well, okay. But anyway, I'm going to put him down. So, agree, disagree with what I said. What did you think of Dr. Sleep? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritland. I'll see you soon.